The public is being conditioned to look at the sky, to watch for hypersonic missiles and bomber patrols. This is a strategic misdirection. The kinetic cost of a peer-to-peer conflict is mathematically prohibitive. The real vector of attack is not a missile launch. It is absolute engineered silence. The global economic and military architecture runs on a nervous system of undersea fiber optic cables. 99% of all transcontinental data, trillions in daily financial transactions. CSIS analysis confirms these cables are concentrated in predictable, indefensible choke points. Severing them is not a decapitation strike. It is an erasure of the system itself. No SWIFT, no market data, no command and control. The second vector of silence is orbital. The obsession with kinetic anti-satellite weapons is another cost-prohibitive fallacy. The efficient protocol is non-kinetic. Dazzling lasers, high-power microwave bursts, and GPS spoofing. You don't destroy the satellite, you just blind it. You turn a billion-dollar asset into inert space debris without firing a single shot. This is the blueprint for creating the blind Leviathan. A superpower committed to alliances across the globe, as documented by 24/7 Wall Saint, suddenly has no eyes and no ears. It cannot see the drone swarms that China has showcased. It cannot process the currency market interventions that trigger, as one report notes, risk-off sentiment for the broader equity markets. It is a fortress of immense power, completely unplugged from reality. A cornered animal, deaf and blind, with its hand on the launch on warning trigger. This isn't warfare, it's systemic demolition. The motive for asymmetric escalation is not ideology, it is a solvency crisis. When a state's balance sheet can no longer sustain the kinetic cost of conventional warfare, it is forced to pivot. This is not a strategic choice, it is a mathematical imperative driven by domestic weakness. Consider the Russian Federation. Analysts at CSIS document how the kinetic and economic expenditures of the Ukraine conflict evolved into a severe domestic liability. An unpopular war drains state liquidity and erodes political capital, forcing the system into a defensive financial posture. It can no longer afford a peer-to-peer fight. This weakness forces the pivot to asymmetry. Instead of building an aircraft carrier, you execute a currency market intervention to trigger a risk-off event in U.S. equities, as detailed in recent market alerts. Instead of deploying a tank division, you leverage swarm tactics, where one soldier can launch 200 drones, a blueprint demonstrated in the South China Morning Post. Each maneuver is a low-cost vector aimed at a high-cost systemic liability. The goal is not to win a single decisive battle. The goal is to engineer a war of 1,000 cuts, inducing a cascading collapse. This is the protocol for bankrupting a superpower when you can no longer afford to fight it head-on. The entire protocol of asymmetric escalation is built on a single brutal economic equation. Analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, frame the kinetic cost inversion this way. A $5 million main battle tank can be neutralized by a $500 FPV drone. This is not a balanced fight. It is an economic execution. For every high-cost complex asset a superpower fields, an adversary can deploy thousands of low-cost threats, creating a mathematically guaranteed solvency crisis. This is the democratization of violence. The barrier to entry for projecting lethal system-degrading force has collapsed. It no longer requires a nation-state's budget, merely a credit card and a shipping address. The objective is not to win on the battlefield, but to bankrupt the opponent before the battle is even fought. The new architecture of war is not being built in fortified bunkers or conventional military bases. It is being beta-tested in plain sight. The true battlefield is a distributed network of gray zones, regions of systemic fragility selected for their plausible deniability. These are not the cause of the conflict. They are the laboratories. The protocol is dual vector. First, economic. Reports confirm that targeted currency interventions, like the recent rapid appreciation of the yen against the dollar, are not random market noise. They are probes. As analysts at SocGen noted, there is a direct mathematical relationship between these currency shocks and volatility in U.S. equities. This is a weaponized vector designed to test the financial system's breaking points, a digital reconnaissance mission against American solvency. Second, kinetic. While the system's financial shock absorbers are being mapped, the physical attack vectors are perfected. The South China Morning Post has documented the blueprint, a single soldier deploying a swarm of 200 drones from a mobile, containerized platform. This is the definition of asymmetric leverage. The objective is not to win a battle, but to impose an unsustainable kinetic cost on a high-cost asset, engineering a localized solvency crisis for the defender. Analysts at 24/7, WallSaint and CSIS identify nations with high internal stress and wavering institutional stability. These are the optimal gray zones. An adversary can test drone swarm logistics, cyber attack protocols, and supply chain disruptions within these proxy states without ever triggering a direct treaty-based military response from NATO. The regional instability reported in places like South Africa is not the story. It is the cover. It provides the perfect environment to stage and calibrate these asymmetric weapons before they are aimed at the core. The doctrine is called Launch on Warning. It is the protocol that governs the first 30 minutes of global extinction. The logic is simple. If early warning systems detect an incoming nuclear strike, you must launch your own arsenal before it is destroyed on the ground. It is a mathematical, use it or lose it, defensive measure. But the entire system is predicated on one assumption, that the radar is telling the truth. The new vector of attack is not a hypersonic missile. It is a signaled disruption. Reports from the South China Morning Post detail Chinese military units deploying 200 drones with a single soldier. This is not just a kinetic threat. Analysts at CSIS confirm that drone swarms can be leveraged for sophisticated electronic warfare, creating a corridor of blindness for an adversary's most critical sensor networks. The cost is negligible. The potential leverage is absolute. This creates the fog of digital war. A cyber attack or an electronic warfare swarm can deliberately blind a nation's early warning system. More critically, it can inject false data, simulating a massive incoming launch. The commander on duty is now trapped by his own protocol. The system, designed to prevent a surprise attack, becomes an accelerant for a launch based on a phantom. The choice is a zero-sum calculation. Option A. Wait for confirmation. If the attack is real, your arsenal is annihilated and you lose unconditionally. Option B. Trust the protocol and launch. If the warning was false, you have initiated global thermonuclear war. The doctrine of launch on warning removes human judgment and forces a decision based on pre-programmed logic. A logic that never accounted for an adversary who could manipulate the data itself. This is the blueprint for asymmetric escalation. While one vector targets economic stability, exemplified by currency interventions that trigger risk-off sentiment in U.S. equity markets as cited by SocGen, another vector targets command and control. It is a systemic assault designed to engineer a solvency crisis in two forms: financial collapse or the forced expenditure of the ultimate asset in a strategic miscalculation. The objective is not to win a battle, but to force the system to defeat itself. The architecture of asymmetric escalation requires a test case, not a declaration of war, but a calibration shot, an event designed to measure systemic fragility and political response time. The protocol is not to destroy an asset, but to demonstrate the capability to do so at will, with perfect deniability. The target is not military, but economic solvency. The first vector is financial. A document from SocGen confirms the direct relationship between Japanese yen intervention and U.S. equity volatility. Since mid-2024, a stronger yen has been a direct catalyst for risk-off sentiment. This is not a market anomaly. It is a preloaded financial weapon. An engineered currency shock, as seen in the recent USD-JPY crash, is the signal flare. It primes the global system for a liquidity crisis. The second vector is kinetic, but unattributable. While legacy systems focus on carrier groups, adversaries are operationalizing low-cost, high-leverage swarm protocols. The South China Morning Post has showcased tactics involving a single operator deploying 200 drones. This isn't for battlefield saturation. It is for precise surgical strikes on the high-cost, fragile nodes of Western infrastructure, ports, data centers, energy grids. The calibration forecast for the next 12 months is therefore a synchronized two-vector event. Expect a manufactured currency crisis to coincide within a 48-hour window with a widespread cascading power and data blackout at a critical Northern European container port. It will be blamed on a software glitch or a solar flare. It will not be an act of war. It will be a mathematical proof of concept, demonstrating that the cost to cripple a Western economy has fallen below the cost for that economy to defend itself.